Today's guest is co-founder and CEO of one of the world's most valuable fintech companies and quite possibly the next big fintech IPO. They raised over $800 million and in 2022 were last valued at over $15 billion while doing over $300 million in revenue. So Arik, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you guys have a massive footprint. Today you serve over 250,000 customers globally. You support 1,200 local payment methods. That's quite a bit to take in. To help orient folks, I think it'd be great to talk through two of your marquee customers and what they use Rapyd to do. I'm thinking specifically of Uber and Google. And then from there, we can dive into more of the backstory, how you got to where you are today.
First of all, I think these two clients represent a very good example of how flexible and diversified the platform that we sell today. Google, for example, is a client of ours in Southeast Asia. They're using us in order to enable consumers to buy stuff on the Play Store, but not with a Visa or a MasterCard or with an Amex. Actually, with other types of payment methods that exist on planet Earth. So I think that, most of us, we're used to buying on the Apple Store or in the Google Play Store just by putting our card number and clicking on a button to purchase and download the app. But people that don't have Visa and MasterCard, they still use, for example, Android, and they still want to buy stuff on Google on the Play Store. And basically, Rapyd took around 70 different payment methods that exist in Southeast Asia that represents the preferred way for people to pay, from different type of local wallets to big payments and QR-based payments that exist there, and basically enabled Google to allow people to buy through the Play Store with this type of payment methods in 7 different countries in Southeast Asia. So that's one use case.
Yeah. And in the US, we have a biased perspective to your point. We think we understand how payments work, and then you realize it's quite more heterogeneous abroad.
Yeah, it's completely different. I think that the US doesn't understand how unique it is in a way that basically everybody's using cards in order to pay. And as soon as you get out of the US and Israel, by the way, which is also a 99% card market, you suddenly get to markets even like the Netherlands. Nobody pays with a card online. They use a payment method that is called Ideal, which is a bank payment for all their online purchases. Or in Japan, that people even prefer to pay in cash. That's the preferred payment method in Japan for online purchases, is to go to 7-Eleven and pay in cash, which sounds nuts, but this is what they do.
And it's totally non-obvious for a country that's, for a lot of other technologies, very much an early adopter, but yeah. Still paying in cash.
I think that a lot of people, miss the understanding that at the end of the day, people have a preferred way to pay, and it's not the way that Visa and MasterCard prefer them to pay. Like, we are coming, both of us, from a Visa and MasterCard and Amex-dominated world, but in a lot of markets, even in Japan, which is a very advanced country, that's not the preferred way for people. And I think that, as Rapyd, we learned over the last several years of building this global business that really people have a lot of weird preferences, but our goal is to, at the end of the day, provide them their preferred way to pay or to get paid, because this is how you convert. And this is what the clients care. And this is why Google cares. This is why Google works with Rapyd, as an example.
Yeah, it's amazing how you go to some websites, you try and log in, you try and pay for something, it's just too hard, and that shouldn't be that case. Love to just talk through like the non-obvious use case of cash payments for the Google Play Store, like what that actually looks like functionally for a consumer and how Rapyd supports that, and also like what percentage that makes up of the payments for, XYZ geography that Rapyd supporting Google in.
I can give you statistics of Rapyd, not of Google specifically, because of NDAs and stuff like this, but just to explain the experience. It will not sound slick, not for you, not for me, and probably not for 99% of the people that are listening. But at the end of the day, this is what the consumer prefers in some of the markets. Basically, the consumer goes to the checkout experience. They get a barcode or a QR code at the end of the process, and then they can go to the bodega next to their house, if it is a 7-Eleven or Indomart, Alphamart, depending on the country, wherever you are, scan the QR code, pay in cash, and boom, the software /app whatever starts to work. So it's partially offline, process, but there are markets that people prefer to do it this way. Mexico, I think, is the biggest example of the preferred way that people do it. In Brazil, around 25%, I think 20 to 25% of the people pay with Boleto. It's declining because of new payment methods that came into the country, but still it is probably around 20%. There are definitely markets like in Thailand and even in Japan, like I mentioned, that people prefer to do it this way.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's a great example, the Google Play Store, and that's mostly pay-ins. Your other customer, one of your other big customers, Uber, they do some pay-ins and payouts. So I think it'd be great to talk through how they leverage Rapyd's platform.
They were one of the first clients that we had as a company. They came in early when we were quite a small company in around 2018. They started with a very unique use case. They needed
and 2018 being the first year you guys did revenue as well, so this was quite early.
Yeah, they're like one of the probably first 50 clients, but the big client for sure. And they had a use case that also will not make any sense to you, but in a second afterwards it will make sense. They needed to allow their drivers to pay Uber in cash. Now you're asking yourself a question: why the hell will an Uber driver need to pay Uber, and why will he do it in cash? It's very simple. In all of the developed markets, the way that Uber works is that basically the driver registers to the app. He needs to pick up people and drop them somewhere, and then Uber collects the money, and then Uber takes 25% commission and pays the driver for the drive. But if you go into markets where people pay in cash for Uber rides, and yes, there are a lot of markets that basically Uber allows people to pay in cash, like a taxi. If it is Mexico, if it is Brazil, if it is other countries on planet Earth, basically what happens is that you order an Uber, the Uber arrives, you sit in the car, at the end you pay the driver in cash, and then Uber has a problem. The driver owes Uber money, and 75% of the money that he just received, which is a very interesting situation. So basically they were in a position that they had to request the drivers to pre-fund them with money upfront in order to allow them to drive, because you can't, be in a situation where the driver needs to pay you. Now, how will a driver in Bolivia or in Mexico will give Uber money? There is no bank for Uber in these countries that you can come in with money and deposit it. So basically what Rapyd did back in these days is created a situation that the driver gets a QR code, he goes to a 7-Eleven / another store, scans the code, deposits his money with Uber, and then the app unlocks him and he can drive up until, he reaches a certain balance. That was the first use case. After that, we went with Uber to other use cases of doing disbursements of salaries and issuing cards for their corner shop food delivery buyers, which is also another use case that a lot of times people don't understand. In Latin America, it works a little bit different, the food delivery. A lot of times the food is delivered from stores that are not on the catalog. Like, it's not a digital payment that is done from Uber or from Deliveroo, to the store. So you actually have a person that you order for him a pizza from a specific corner store pizza. He goes there, he pays the pizza, and then he picks up the pizza and goes. So all of these, unique money movement situations were the things that, we enabled for them.
Yep. Absolutely. And yeah, you think, payments in the US, but then you realize there's a lot of diversity around the world. I worked at Checker. Uber is actually one of our defining first customers there. And you have this kind of tension when you have a big customer like that, because they're incredibly helpful and help you scale, but they can also be very demanding and can help shape, both in good ways and bad, your product roadmap. I'm curious to hear, beyond the initial product, what was like the first product that they then asked you to build for them, and how did you think about building it for Uber versus trying to make sure that was a generalizable product you'd be able to build other folks? This is important because it's how you become a platform, is kind of triaging your product roadmap.
They came very early with a requirement to basically do what we used to call, and we still call these days, a reverse API. So basically, instead of them integrating to our API, we need to create a situation that somehow our product is connected to their API, which is against the logic of a payment platform. Because the way that the payment platform works is that you have a payment infrastructure that is connected to banks, acquirers, whatever it is, and then client comes in, plugs into your platform, and does payments. And they basically created a situation that they created some kind of an API, and they wanted our platform to do everything through their API, which is completely opposite. And back in that day,
and so this is not just you sending them webhooks; it's you literally consuming an API from them,
creating the payment through their APIs. Like, super strange reverse way of connecting and moving the money. And back in the day, we thought it is a very Uber unique situation, and how we're going to manage it, and we're going to have code that is endless spaghetti sitting in our system. But our engineering team came up with an idea of building a type of unique layer for this type of reverse integrations, that we said that, one day somebody else will need to use it, and let's create something that is more productized. And actually Google, of course, had the same situation, and a couple of other very large scale clients that I cannot mention their name were in the same situation. So over the years, this small feature that started like, okay, fine, let's do it, turned into something that probably we have today around 50 clients connected through it. And these 50 clients are generating around 10 to 15% of our revenue, which is like very significant.
That's great. And usually these first movers like an Uber, the types of products they need are indicative of other things that folks in the market need. And you as a fintech company are actually able to move quickly to capitalize on those opportunities. I know as I was at Checker, I was a software engineer and I was writing a bunch of code. And when I was cleaning up our code base, I would find old things where we had like if Uber, and it's like, oh, that's not a great way to do it. A better way is to build. And we also generalized it, but sometimes you can't get around that and you have a little bit of tech debt. So anyways, building those subsequent products can lead you into new adjacent use cases that other folks are going to use. Like today you said you have, 50 clients using something that was originally brought to you just by Uber. Also, if you're a bank and you want to do payouts for like Uber, like, oh, maybe we can do that for you. And then if Uber goes to the bank, it's like, and we also want you to integrate with our API, they'd be like, we literally have no idea what you are talking about, or even how to like run that through our compliance people or engineers. So great examples of, companies moving quickly with great clients to become, bigger platforms. So I think it's a good story there to talk through for Uber and how that relates to Rapyd's development as a platform. You guys weren't always a platform though. So I want to actually dive back to how you got started. A lot of the kind of defining platform companies within fintech started out as consumer companies, and would love to understand your story of how you started B2C and then ended up pivoting B2B.
Yeah, so it's quite a funny story because in 2015, at the end of 2015, me and my co-founders, after selling a successful business in cloud computing, we decided to start a new company. Back then, in the end of 2015, you need to remember everybody wanted to be the Uber of something. Uber was the hottest thing, in the world, and everybody thought about this Uber model for other types of businesses. And we decided in a very stupid decision to go into consumer payments. 3 guys, no clue about financial services, never worked in a financial services organization, don't understand how the world works, don't understand anything about consumer. By the way, we came from enterprise, but we thought that, from a tech perspective, we know what we're going to do. And we decided to build a consumer-facing product that is a type of a PayPal competitor, a wallet that is built on alternative payment rails. We wanted to disconnect ourselves from the traditional payment rails in order to reduce cost and create flexibility. And we built this product that, the company name back then was called Cash Dash, and it was a wallet that allows you to deposit money in a variety of ways, from, cash at digital ATMs without a card, to bank transfers to cards, convert currency in multi-currency accounts, issue virtual cards, pay the point of sale, something very sophisticated. And we stumbled into every single problem that exists on planet Earth for a year and a half when we were trying to build a product because there were no infrastructure. So we had to integrate to 7 different companies in order to operate only in one country, which was the UK. We had to get regulated, have lawyers, compliance teams, all this mess. And we launched the product and we looked at each other as people that came from cloud computing and said, how can it be that there are no infrastructure plays in payments? How can it be that you have AWS, you don't need to build a data center, you don't need to install servers, you don't need to do anything, but in finance, you need to build a stack all the way on your own. Wallets, ledgers, screening, KYC, AML, money in, money out. So we decided, okay, it doesn't make any sense, let's pivot. And we pivoted the company from CashDash into Rapyd, turn it into an API-only infrastructure play, and from that, everything changed.
At that point in time, there have been some of those components that infrastructure built domestically within the U.S., but a lot of the global infrastructure certainly had not, and even today has not, which is why you guys have a pretty full product roadmap. So we already talked a little bit about 2 of your kind of marquee clients, and Uber being one of the defining ones. Would love to also understand what it looks like to scale a fintech platform, especially globally. You guys operate in 190 countries. You have licenses, and I think 41 of them. When you scaled, you do things like crash a bank in Taiwan, because in fintech, it's not just about finding product market fit. It's also figuring out how to scale and do so compliantly. So what were some of the challenges scaling specific customers, I think, and specific stories would be interesting for folks to hear about?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that what people need to understand is that I pretty much think that the only industry where you have so much diversification of technology and requirements is only financial services when you go into multiple countries. Because, when you're selling a SaaS software, security, or some kind of another product, you need to do some small adjustments to a country, mainly around language and some small features. But when you into financial services, every country looks different. The banking system is different. The currency is different. The regulation is different. Even, card programs that people think that look the same, they look different. So I think that as soon as we started to scale our product outside of the UK, which was the first country, we started to stumble into endless amount of problems, with especially around requirements of compliance, risk, and everything that is related to the regulation, because at the end of the day, every country has their own rules. And even in Europe, when people think European Union is one place, it's not one place. Even in Europe, it was diversified. Now, when we got to Asia, it was already a cultural clash. A bunch of Israelis and Americans came to Asia trying to understand how to do things. Asia is a very fintech, advanced market in fintech. They have a lot of wallets, a lot of other capabilities. So we have to do a lot of adoptions. But I think the funniest story was when we started to operate in Taiwan, and we worked with a very large client in doing basically payouts, bank transfers in Taiwan. We worked with one of the biggest banks there. Supposedly they had very legit tech. We did the integration, we did the testing, we went live after a while, and then we go live with the client. And after like several hours that the client is live, we get a phone call, urgent, from somebody at the bank that they're cutting us off because we crashed the bank financial system, like the back end of the bank. And we tell them, what the hell are you talking about? Like, we didn't do anything. They said, oh my God, you send 10,000 payouts in 15 minutes and you crashed our entire banking core. I said, but okay, so we sent 10,000 requests. So what, in 15 minutes? It's nothing. They said, no, you don't understand. We can get one request maximum per second. We said, okay, that's a problem. And they said, what do you mean you can get a request per second? I said, oh, our technology stack is not able to do anything in parallel. It's basically you need to build a queue on your side. And, we ended up building like a super twisted solution with queuing specifically for this bank that waits for like 5 minutes between transactions and slow downs everything. And we had to fake it until we make it, with our client to show them that something is working fast, but at the end of the day, it was working very slow.
In fintech, if you haven't had something break at even modest levels of scale, you're probably not really working in fintech. I think inside of every fintech company too, two things you talked about. One is you're scaling, you have to cover all these geographies. Some of the most important code you end up writing is actually a compliance and regulatory rules engine, because moving money is easy. Moving money compliantly in a way that doesn't break your infrastructure partners, and doing all like the load balancing where you can literally send like one request for this institution between these hours, and these are the bank holidays in Japan versus XY. And it's like, oh my God, like this is so much harder than I thought it would be.
Especially when you need to take into consideration foreign exchange that is involved somewhere in the process, when the bank is closed because the bank holiday and you need to send the money in a different currency, and which rate it is because the rates are closed. For people that are coming from technology, stumbling into these problems they're not technology problems, they're just broken financial institution problems. It is sometimes, it drives us crazy. We still say it, by the way, even today, I had an issue with some kind of a compliance requirement that is completely new in the country that was escalated and then to my desk, and I was literally holding my head and I said, how can it be 7 years into this and still something new comes up?
And I think that's what keeps fintech so interesting for folks who are building the space, is how many things are frustrating and still broken, that there's always more work to be done. I think that's a good jumping off point too, to talk about the Rapyd platform and the product roadmap. So maybe just quick high level, your various solutions now, and then some of the ones you're building that you're most excited about, and why you decided to build those things.
So I think, that one of the most exciting things that we've built was our own fraud detection and prevention tool, Rapyd Protect. And I will go back, to the beginning of the company. It was clear for us after getting some fraud cases. Of course, we were surprised that fraud exists and bad people exist in financial services. But after we lost some money, we understood that, we need to build or to buy a fraud prevention tool. Everybody told us, you're not going to build a fraud prevention tool. There are companies that are traded in NASDAQ that are worth billions of dollars that know how to do fraud prevention. We said, okay, we'll buy a software. We did some shopping around. And the thing that amazed me was the fact that none of these companies was willing to take the liability in case something goes wrong and their product didn't work and you lost money in fraud. And it didn't make any sense to me back then. And I said, listen, we have so many use cases that are unique in Rapyd. Like, we're not a card acquirer. It's not a checkout on Amazon to pay with a debit or credit card. We have the pay-ins and the payouts and the cash and the bank transfers. And none of these companies were able to support it. They wanted to do a massive integration project. They wanted us to pay millions, and they were not willing to take the liability. So I told my team, forget about it. We're going to build our own tool. And we've been building for the last 6 years it's still on the go. A very sophisticated fraud prevention tool that is called Rapyd Protect, that protects Rapyd and protects Rapyd clients from all types of fraud and risky stuff that are happening for all the use cases, for all the payment methods, for all the payout methods, for everything that we do. And it became like a big asset, for the company, and a big asset for the customers, that we have. So I think this is number one. And I think the second thing is what you just mentioned, is this compliance engine. Like from day one, because we started to operate in an environment that basically digitalizes cash, because the first payment method that we were dealing with was cash. Even back in the cash days, we basically allowed people to deposit cash into a wallet and digitalize their cash through cardless ATMs and other things. And we were regulated. We had an e-money license. And I remember still going into the meeting with the regulator to get the license, and they looked at me like I'm a lunatic. Why will we give you an e-money license when you want to allow people to deposit cash? Like, what type of AML capabilities that you have that we should trust you, that you're better than Barclays Bank or you're better than this bank? And after we actually showed them the tech that we've built, that was very early stage, they actually granted us a license in 4 months. And up until now, we're very proud of this element of our technology, this compliance engine and AML and risk engine that we have.
That's a huge lift to build, and you kind of get to see uniquely the ways in which you need to do this stuff when you're building some of the newer infrastructure in the space. That's also a good jumping off point to talk about competition. In fintech, there's often a lot of what you can call co-opetition, where you're both working with partners, but also potentially competitive with them. For example, Stripe is an investor in you, but some of your product footprint overlaps with them and is competitive. Would love to understand how you break down the competitive landscape. Yes, with regards to Stripe, but also thinking through the card networks, other global payment providers, and how that looks for a company that's continually expanding its product roadmap.
So first of all, in fintech, everybody competes and cooperates with everybody. This situation is very popular because at the end of the day, even banks that are in theory competing, a lot of times they're working together as in correspondent networks or in other types of products that they do together. So I think in fintech, it's also something that you see a lot. The story around us and Stripe is a little bit different. Back in the early stages, when we were a very small company and we were raising capital, one of our investors, General Catalyst, basically thought it would be a good idea that the company will take an investment from Stripe. And back then we were actually two different companies. They were very much focused on card acquiring in the US and a little bit in Europe. And we were focused only on doing not the US and actually alternative payment methods. So back then it made a lot of sense, to take an investment from them. And the buzz from a PR perspective and anything that happened from that investment was very positive for the company. But over the years, our product became very similar to theirs and their product became very similar to others. And today, we have similar stacks. Still, we operate in a lot of countries that they are not there, and we are not present in the US almost at all because it's not our core market. On the other hand, they are not present in some of the other markets. So we overlap probably a little bit in Europe, we overlap in Singapore and maybe in Brazil, and there we compete. In other markets, we don't cooperate, but we also don't compete because it's not the focus for any of us. And they became a financial investor at the end of the day on the company. On the other hand, there are some companies that we're working together with them in order to open corridors, let's say in Africa or in very long tail markets in Southeast Asia. But they also compete with us, in the core markets that we have, and it's okay. I think that there is a lot of respect in fintech. People are not poaching each other clients that easily. It's not a Wild West story. It's pretty much, covered nicely these days.
One of the things I love about being a fintech investor is the co-opetition allows me to provide a lot of value and network connectivity to portfolio companies, because there are so many reasons to work with someone who needs to be a regulatory license provider, maybe a fraud provider, maybe a banking sponsor, a payments partner. So there's a lot of connectivity. I think that's why having the right investors very early on can be particularly helpful within financial services. To your point, General Catalyst is the one who made the introduction to Stripe, which helped generate some buzz about Rapyd and educate the US investor market as to why what you were building globally was so interesting. I want to cover the other big thing too, which is you guys are gearing up for an IPO. I think in 2022, you said you had crossed $300 million in revenue. You're hopefully eyeing a path toward profitability. What are you looking to achieve and unlock before you gear up for an IPO, depending, of course, on where markets are and,
Yeah.
and what that looks
So
like.
everybody, when you talk about an IPO these days, it's clear for everybody you're talking an IPO that will happen in 2 or 3 years time frame, because everybody understands that this market is not the market forever. It's going to change. It's going to go back up. Of course, nobody knows if it's going to go back up to 2021, but back to normal for sure. From our perspective, we don't really try to time the best timing, from an IPO perspective, because it's like catching a falling knife. It's very dangerous. But we're more focused on, building a company. We just announced, a couple of months ago, a very large acquisition of a company called PayU, which is a $600 million acquisition. And together, both companies are going to be above $1 billion in revenue. And in a 3-year time frame, we're basically looking into doubling the company to $2 billion in revenue and around $400 to $500 million of positive EBITDA. So it's a very profitable business that is still growing significantly and is one of the biggest payment plays on planet Earth. And from our perspective, the $2 billion revenue mark is basically the mark that we are ready to ring the bell. So from here until the $2 billion mark, we're going to focus a lot on corporate governance, building a lot of things that are required, for an IPO, from a company perspective and from a technology perspective. And of course, hitting the targets and executing on our sales. And when we will hit it, if the market will be ready to accept us, then we will go public. That's the plan at the end of the day.
We'd love to break down how you plan to get to $2 billion in revenue, especially the inorganic growth lever or M&A. I think that's an interesting use case that some platforms can do at scale when you build better infrastructure. You can make acquisitions that are accretive because you can swap out the old technology. And in particular, you have an interesting criteria about what types of acquisitions you will do based on how much of a technical lift it is to onboard their customers?
So first of all, we believe only in our own technology. We've done 3 acquisitions up until today that were successful. This is the 4th acquisition that we're doing in basically 4 years. In all the acquisitions, the main criteria was how easy it will be to migrate the clients from the existing tech stack to our tech stack. And this migration allows us to do 2 things. First of all, it allows us to control the cost dramatically better, because we believe that our technology is more superior, and from a processing cost perspective and operational perspective, it will allow us to have much better margins. And second thing, we can cross-sell to the new install base of clients that we got, the additional products and capabilities that we have. And these are, at the end of the day, the things that we look at from an acquisition perspective. I think that when you look at this PayU acquisition that we've done, one of the most important things from our perspective was the fact that we were able to take a company that has around $350 million in revenue and like 50,000 clients, and literally migrate their entire install base to our platform without requesting any one of their clients to write a single line of code. That was for us the most impressive thing. This is why we wanted to go for this deal, because we understood that in a 12-month time frame after the acquisition is closed, we can migrate the entire tech stack to ours. And then you look at the install base and you understand that you have another probably $50 to $100 million of revenue that you can extract from this install base just from cross-selling. And then on top of it, you have some regulatory licenses that we don't have today and some capabilities that we can leverage and we can use. So it was definitely super interesting for us. And from our perspective, if you look at the $2 billion story, this acquisition will represent probably around 600, 700 million, right, out of the 2 billion, which is pretty much 1/3 of the 2 billion acquisition, 2 billion, revenue. So this is why it made sense for us.
It's very important that this is a company doing 350 million in revenue, 50,000 clients, I think you said, and no code changes to onboard them. You acquire regulatory licenses. You now acquire the ability to cross-sell. And I think, one of the big things we need to prove out to the public markets is that these fintech platforms being built have unique capabilities. And one way you can demonstrate that is inorganic growth, where you can actually incorporate and basically just be doing higher revenue or more revenue at higher margin through some of these acquisitions. And so that'll be a very interesting story for the public markets to digest as you go down that road.
We've seen quite a lot of our investors over the years start being very skeptical every time they saw an M&A. And every time we proved to them, that we are able to do it. We started with an M&A of 10 million, we moved to 16, then we did 100. Now we do 600, right? We do it very gradually. I do think this is our last acquisition before an IPO, because I don't think, we will do another acquisition, because it will take us another 4 or 5 months to close the deal from a regulatory perspective, and then another year to integrate. And then we want to run another year as one big company and then go public. So I think that, from now until being public, we will not do additional acquisitions. But afterwards, I think that we have a very good, corporate culture and good corporate team and post-merger integration skills to incorporate into these additional businesses.
Acquisitions and consolidations have been a huge part of growth in financial services. If you look at Bank of America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, there's that famous chart of all of the banks that they acquired over time that eventually rolled up into those brands. And I agree, investors have been incredibly skeptical because it is really, really hard. But if folks start proving out that playbook, I think that could help generate a lot of excitement for some of these companies, because instead of being like, oh, these are multi-billion-dollar companies, maybe you can be $100 billion company. Maybe you can be $1 trillion company.
On one hand, it's hard, but on the other hand, if there is one industry that it is not as hard, it is financial services. And the reason is because when you're, for example, a cybersecurity company and you're buying another cybersecurity company that has a different product, moving clients from one product to another and moving technology stacks and integrating technology stacks, it's a very messy thing. And there is always somebody that will compete on the sidelines that will say, if you already need to migrate, you can move to me, and that is true. But in financial services, at the end of the day, people are attached in a financial relationship, exactly like you're attached to your bank. You will not leave your bank very quickly. It's not going to happen overnight. In the same way, in payments, people will not leave unless you're going to give them a very bad customer experience. Now, after that comes technology. If you're able to make technology seamless for them, there is no way they will leave, right? And I think that this is the sauce, the secret sauce around doing acquisitions in financial services is really understanding how to migrate the clients and, without requesting them to do technology changes, which is much more easier in financial services versus doing it in other industries.
Yeah, I push back a little bit that I think in financial services, you can do acquisitions that are very, very hard to integrate. I worked at Bank of America and saw how long it took them to integrate other core banking systems. It would take 3 to 5 years, be 2 years behind schedule, 5 years over budget. But there are areas where if you're clever about how you do it, it can be, and this is where I agree, a lot easier. And when you know how to identify those opportunities and adjudicate them, that's really, really exciting. So IPO is probably the next big funding path for you because you guys have a lot of cash on the balance sheet and already have these acquisitions. It would be good to reflect on your perspective on funding for starting a company generally, since you have both bootstrapped a company and now also started a company that's raised $800 million. So to put this question simply, why should a founder bootstrap versus take venture capital?
So bootstrapping is only good if you want to build a small company. If you want to build a company up to $100 million of value, then bootstrapping is the right way to go, right? Because then when you will sell it, you will get $100 million. But if you're thinking about building a company that will be worth hundreds or billions of dollars, you will always need to have an external party that will set the valuation for you, right? And one of the things that I learned from running a bootstrap and selling a bootstrap successfully, that I could have sold this company for 5 times more if I had an investor that is a VC or somebody else setting the valuation up. So when the buyer will come in, he will say, wait, okay, this company is worth not 100, it is worth 500 because this VC invested in it and they need to get back their money and the multiplier is going to be like this and like that. So at the end of the day, it's really a question of what type of company you're aiming to build. If you really want to build a huge company, you have to get external funding, because running a bootstrap still has a lot of limitations because you're not going to generate enough cash in order to burn cash to grow the business. But if you want to build a company, which is okay, over 100, 150, $200 million, bootstrap is the cool way to do it, because then, you can do whatever you want. Take the risk on your own because you're financing the company and nobody's going to get involved in the way.
And there's a little bit of a bias in the public mind because starting any kind of company is hard, whether you bootstrap or take venture funding. Probably, north of 50% of them fail. If you bootstrap and fail, you fail very quietly. Whereas in venture, you can also raise a ton of money, set it on fire, and fail very publicly. And so you can see the failures that happen when you raise venture capital, where it's much harder to see the failures that happen bootstrapping. But venture funding has backed, an inordinate or a disproportional percentage of the large outcomes in the public markets, the Facebooks, the Googles, beyond. Some other questions I want to talk into, because you guys have some other unique tactics around growing the business, not just from an acquisition of company standpoint, from an acquisition of talent. So would love to hear the story of how you reduce the cost of hiring an engineer from $30,000 to $3,000.
One day, if we will write a book about Rapyd as a company, there are some crazy stories. I think this is definitely ranked as the craziest story. Back in 2021, in the days of super hype in tech, there were resilient companies and every company raised 50, 100, 200 million dollars. There was a huge fight for engineering talent, and it was very complicated to a young company like Rapyd to stand up and actually be a brand that people are familiar with and a company that people want to work with. And you can invest as much money as you want in talent acquisitions teams and go to developer events and do whatever you want on LinkedIn, but nobody will know who you are, like especially back then. You need something that will turn you into a brand that everybody's familiar with. So we just hired, we moved to a new office, and we were thinking about doing some kind of an office opening party. And, we were thinking about, okay, maybe we can merge it together with something that is recruiting related. And then somebody came up with an idea. Let's do a rave on the rooftop of the new office. So we have an office with a very nice rooftop. Let's do a rave. Let's bring a DJ. Now, 2021 is right after COVID. You remember, no music, no parties, no nothing. COVID just ended. So we said, okay, let's do a rave. And back then, all the DJs were out of work because they didn't play. So we ended up bringing in the same night David Guetta and Tiesto and Swedish House Mafia and all these big DJs. All of them came to one rave in Tel Aviv in one night that turned to be like the biggest party that pretty much ever happened in a private event. And it turned into this massive event that everybody was trying to get tickets. Everybody was talking about it. People were flying to the event from all over the world. And then overnight, everybody knew who Rapyd is. Like literally, it was completely insane. And it was the best money we ever invested because...
And you caught a lot of flack, I think, in the press and from certain quarters for throwing a lavish party. But if you do the economics of it...
The economics, by the way, were approved by the board. The board saw the numbers and they said, wow, that's the best thing that this company has done because we reduced our hiring cost from around $50,000 to $3,000 of an engineer. And more than that, we got exposure on the internet and social media, Facebook, Instagram, and a lot of other places, of hundreds of millions of views of people that saw the brand because this DJ posted and each one of them has 10 million people, 15 million people that are following them. We had a lot of clients that were signed because of it. It paid back in like 6 months, maybe less. The entire thing paid back. People in the media wrote about it because this is their job. They need to write about stuff. But at the end of the day, from a unit economic perspective, that was brilliant. It paid back big time.
There's always these interesting stories of founders doing things differently that are surprising, but then,
But I have to tell you, I have to ask you a question, right? If you go and you, as a VC-backed company, you come in with a marketing plan to give Google $5 million for Google ads and to acquire clients, everybody would say, yeah, sure, do it. But we converted 50 times better than Google ads, right? So what's the difference? So I gave the money, in other ways, in another investment, but it converted 50 times better. That was the difference.
I want to hit a couple trends in fintech and the broader ecosystem related to that story, which was about hiring. How do you view the market and the war for talent now that the tech ecosystem, from a funding perspective, has cooled? Are you still throwing parties trying to hire a ton of engineers? Or are you getting enough inbound you don't need to?
No, so first of all, we have enough inbound we don't need, right? We don't do parties for the parties to burn money. We did it as a marketing strategy that paid back. We don't need at the current stage because we have enough inbound, but also we don't need as many engineers as we needed in the past. In the past, when we did the party, we had an engineering team of 40 people and we needed to scale the engineering team to 200 people in 6 months. And we were successful, which was almost mission impossible in 2021. Even now, it's very hard. Today, I think the market is much less competitive. Engineers can be found in the market very quickly. The prices of the talent is pretty much still the same, but the availability of the people is much bigger. So I think that this war for talent definitely cooled down, completely, and it's probably going to stay cooled down for at least the next 2-3 years. But there are still, the prices of engineers are high and will remain high.
Who is the hardest profile to find that's the most valuable?
I think at the end of the day, a really good full stack engineer, but like very good full stack engineer that knows to work front end, back end, and database is the hardest one to find. But I'm talking about like serious people and not somebody that knows a little bit front end and some back end, but literally people that know how to do end to end. They're the most complicated. And I think that good DBAs, Like if you need a good DBA, database administrator for like big databases, super challenging to find. It's one of the hardest ones.
Yep. And basically to find those people, you can only find them inside of big companies that have scaled successfully. An Airbnb, a Stripe, turns out very hard to get them to leave generally. But for other categories of talent, it's been super exciting to me to see the quality of candidates that the pre-seed and seed stage companies that I back are able to attract. And so I can imagine for Rapyd too, when you go out and do a search for someone in the C-suite, the VP, the SVP of, XYZ, you're able to find some great talent. Second trend in the fintech ecosystem, AI, hype versus reality, how it's going to inform internal versus external products.
So first of all, let's be honest. There is a lot of hype around AI. The majority of it is complete nonsense, but there are use cases for AI that are very good. I can tell you that in financial services, the use case for AI, and we started to use it before it was called AI, but okay, today everybody will call it AI, is basically for compliance operations and risk operations, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a machine. It needs to make decisions based on data, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is risky, what is not risky, how to deal with the risk. So you're basically taking a lot of decisions were made by people and by existing knowledge of data that you have, and you basically teach the machine how to do these decisions better. And I think that, we've been using it extremely well over the last 2-3 years. And now we call it AI. Before it was called in a different way. But I definitely think that from an AI perspective, compliance is a big place that AI can definitely do a big shift for financial services. But generally speaking, I feel a little bit like the beginning of crypto, that everybody was trying to put blockchain in every single thing that they wanted. People need to cool down a little bit and really think about, okay, what is the real use case that can actually move the needle with AI?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of the fintech surface area where it's completely irrelevant. If you want to get licensed in 41 countries, if you want to know how to not crash a bank partner, AI, not going to be very helpful. If you want to build a fraud engine, probably very helpful. If you want to enhance your gross margin profile, because every time you have some sort of manual compliance workflow, because your code only covers, 98, 99% automation for certain fraud flows or KYC flows, if you can reduce your ops or your compliance staff, that can be gross margin accretive, as well as allow you to deliver a better product to your end consumers or your end customers, clients, merchants. So I think there's definitely a lot of hype, definitely a lot of areas where it really doesn't matter, but then also some pretty material stuff. I imagine for you guys, internal products, a lot of things around compliance, which you already mentioned. External products, probably the fraud engine and maybe some of those other kind of value-added services on top of the core infrastructure. Last trends question I wanted to ask you was just, what do you think one of the biggest, most exciting trends in fintech is that other people aren't talking about enough? So if they're talking about AI too much, something you think about that you're like, actually, this is exciting, but people aren't talking about it. In fintech or for Rapyd or in global payments.
The exciting thing, from my perspective, is the adoption in the world of things like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and Samsung Pay. Like every time we go into a market, we see how this thing conquers the market and basically eliminates plastic. And I personally think it is just one step away from eliminating Visa and MasterCard and Amex completely. Because at the end of the day, what happens is that nobody needs the plastic anymore. And one day, it's clear for me that the card that you tokenize behind the scenes inside your Apple Pay or Google Pay is going to be changed by you tokenizing directly your bank account. This is where the world is going to go to, and there's going to be a big shock, and it's going to really change a lot of how the system works, because there is a lot of dependencies that have been around in 50, 60 years. And complexity around a lot of things. And I think, this is from my perspective what people are missing, because they're thinking about how cool it is that I can take my phone and tap it, but they don't see the big picture of it's really going to change a lot of stuff that are money related in the world.
And it's a great mega trend where you see smartphone adoption has reached significant penetration and started to tail off, but usage of core services like mobile wallets on those devices continues to tick up, just like smartphones did. And so it's not very exciting on a day-to-day to be like, look, 5% more people in Indonesia are using a wallet. But you start stacking that up over 5 years, and you're like, oh, it's a little interesting now.
Especially when you suddenly understand that in Indonesia, there are 270 million people on planet Earth.
Some of the fastest growing populations and fastest growing economies are ex-US, where the payments landscape is completely different. And Rapyd is there, to help serve some of those folks. Would love to hear, since you have a purview on global infrastructure, if there are any particular areas of problem, or if there are any particular opportunity areas for founders to think about building in global infrastructure. For example, like you're like, this is a problem that I think is broken. I would love to see someone tackle this. Obviously, some of those things you might be like, I want to do it myself. So maybe areas, that.
Their problem, and the problem that nobody was able to solve, and people thought that crypto will solve it, but everybody already understands it's nonsense, is replacing Swift. Everybody understands Swift has to be replaced. Everybody understands that the story about correspondent banking and the way that they're stealing money from people by moving money and cutting pieces of the money between a lot of different legs, it has to end, but nobody's able to replace it. Right? They couldn't find the tech, and blockchain is not the tech to do it already. It's clear. It's the biggest money movement story in the world, the biggest revenue generator probably behind the scenes because the entire system is using it. And this is the thing, right?
There you have one of the biggest problems to be solved. And I agree. Huge problem. Very difficult. But I look forward to finding entrepreneurs who can solve problems like that.
That people are sending money and it's impossible to tell them where the money is? It is completely insane. It's the only place where people accept an answer like this is with their money. But when they're buying on Amazon and there is a FedEx package delivering, they can see every second where it is. But when you're sending $1 million to somebody, you have no clue when it will arrive. Makes no sense.
Yeah. I can probably mail you $1 million of cash, which is illegal, faster for less money with more reliability and better visibility than I could wire you $1 million, which is crazy.
For sure, it's completely crazy. Listen, you know that 35% of the support tickets that we get daily, and we get a lot of support tickets. We have 250,000 clients. 30% of the tickets are, where is my money?
I see so many fintech products where, like, one of the big innovations, and I don't want to be pejorative because it actually is a big innovation, is a pizza tracker. It's like, where is my home in process of closing? Where is my mortgage in process of closing? Where is my loan? Where is my wire? Where is my ACH? Where is my paycheck? There's no visibility. It should be real time.
You know what? Forget about real time. I don't need real time. Tell me where it is. The most beautiful story that I have is that sometimes money is parked in this account in the middle, that the bank receives the money, but they didn't release it to your account. And nobody even tells you it's there. And they're just making money on the float. And it's a lot of money. And they're not sharing it with you. And you're not making any money. And nobody tells you about it. And it is legal.
I think to be incredibly reduction about fintech, one thing I often like to say is that fintech is about one thing. It's getting their people their money faster. Sometimes, because you can't get rid of Swift or some other intermediary, you can't actually get them money faster. But a good close second is just give them visibility so they know where the hell it is. And that's pretty valuable too. Awesome. Well, Arik, this has been a lot of fun, covered a lot of ground and a lot of material. Wishing you guys the best of luck on your path to the IPO. And also, I want to say, thoughts go out to all of the employees and families who have been impacted by the recent events. And I'm sure there's a lot going on, but just know that we're thinking about them.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Arik.